The storm was more powerful than Katrina. It came on shore at 1 o'clock yesterday morning at 150 miles per hour.
This is our community, our little corner of the Bayou State.
Lake Charles, Louisiana, where we live, work, and go to school.
Home to some of the most resilient people you'll ever meet.
Because if you're still here after what we've dealt with in the past year and a half, you're pretty darn tough.
You see, this is our school. This is the school across the street.
This is my old apartment.
And this is where I live today, in a FEMA trailer park, surrounded by neighbors with similar stories, tremendous loss and slow recovery.
While the story of 2020 and 2021 centered around the pandemic for most Americans, we dealt with that in addition to the most federally declared disasters to hit any American city in a 10-month time span.
How can this be happening? How can all of these things be happening? This has got to be some bad dream. This has got to be impossible. No other American city in history has had so many federally declared natural disasters as Lake Charles has had over a 10-month span.
First came Hurricane Laura.
Made landfall near Cameron, Louisiana. It was the most powerful hurricane to strike the Louisiana coast in 150 years. Think of that.
Then it was Hurricane Delta.
We already know that there will be damage in Southwest Louisiana that will be very difficult to differentiate between what was caused by Hurricane Laura and what was caused by Hurricane Delta.
A crippling freeze in a community of people still living in campers, in their driveways or damaged homes with no heat. Then a crazy flood. Right here, while we were in school, waiting to be picked up by high water vehicles.
For what, about an hour and a half? We needed and still need a lot of help to recover. And that's why we're exploring the Federal Emergency Management Agency, or FEMA, and its impact on our daily lives here in Southwest Louisiana.
Well, FEMA has multiple roles. We assess before, during, and after a disaster. During a disaster, we work with the state as well as the presidential mandate when they declare an emergency declaration. So we are compiling resources and personnel and assessing the situation to come in and to provide the most assistance and help that we can.
Some of the biggest needs in the days and weeks after Hurricane Laura in August 2020 were electricity, water, emergency food supplies, and housing. Nearly every roof in our region needed replaced to keep homes from taking on even more damage.
The administrator mentioned we've actually forward deployed plastic sheeting, and we'll work with the Corps of Engineers in the coming days, as well as the state, to provide support to folks whose roofs have been damaged.
FEMA did a lot of things right for the city of Lake Charles. Where FEMA can improve is their temporary housing plan. It should not take 10 months, 9 or 10 months to get people housed after a hurricane.
The state does have the availability to request an extension if a catastrophe has happened to the extent like what has happened here in Southwest Louisiana, and we can stay longer if we need to.
With like the hurricanes and all the natural disasters, like it affected us mostly with like our living situation. Like we were like sleeping on floors and stuff for like a while. Like it was real hard.
The pandemic complicated FEMA's physical presence in our region. Instead, Calcasieu School's Superintendent Carl Brookhouse says 20,000 pictures had to be taken and piles of documentation submitted to get the FEMA help flowing.
All in all, our damages from the Hurricane Laura and Hurricane Delta are going to be about $400 million. We got $40 million in insurance. The other $360 million is going to come from FEMA at 100 or 90% reimbursement, and Calcasieu with our 10% reimbursement. So you can see it's an overwhelming thing money-wise, almost as much as it's been an overwhelming thing dealing with the people part of it for our hurricane losses.
For us, limiting that face-to-face impact while still applying our personnel and our resources to overcome the disaster was one of our key focuses.
Our crew talked to Michael McGowan, a Lake Charles native who produced a Hurricane Laura documentary to show the resilience of our community. What he learned through dozens of interviews resonated with us too. People want to feel like people when working with a federal agency like FEMA.
A lot of times it's just about listening to people, truly putting yourself in somebody's shoes and trying to figure out what would you want someone to do if you were in that situation. I think a lot of times the government agencies, they're too policy driven, and policy isn't always going to align with catastrophe. Sometimes you have to do things a little different. Nobody knew a hurricane was going to happen in the middle of a pandemic, and I think what they could do is just one, listen, and then adjust their policies to what they're hearing from the people.
Southwest Louisiana is appreciative of the $1.6 billion that FEMA and other agencies have delivered to help with immediate response costs, but this is insufficient for what's needed for long-term recovery. Hurricanes Laura and Delta alone have been estimated to cost $16 billion in damage to the region, meaning we've delivered thus far about 1/10 of what's estimated the cost of Laura and Delta.
It's been messy, challenging, a really long 17 months. Federal help has come, but we still need it.
I'm about to graduate, but I don't know if this is where I'm going to stay.
FEMA put a roof over my head, but it only lasts till May.
It's hard to think of any federal agency that could have impacted our lives more than FEMA this past year. This
is our story.